What's going on, everybody? Brett here, and I'm back playing some more Total War Warhammer 2. Getting a little bit of multiplayer action going on, some 2v2s. I was in a group of games with a nice group of guys, and we wanted to test out some of the new units, and we managed to do that just fine. I decided to go ahead and take Bordello with Alberic, the not so generic anymore, thanks to his cool trident addition. He actually looks like a unique guy. He doesn't just look like a standard Bretonnian lord. I actually did take his ability that lets him, basically send out a tidal wave. So we'll get a chance to look at that. But let's go ahead and slow-mo this. It's a 2v2, so there's going to be a lot going on. But luckily my ally also went with Bretonnia. So we just have kind of this amazing Bretonnian synergy going on. Lots of peasants, lots of cavalry, tons of Grail Knights on the field. We each kind of had a very similar idea, but whereas he went with King Lewin Leoncoeur, which is just a great choice. He has regen. Some of his activatable abilities, like the Lion Shield, giving missile resistance and magic resistance, the Sword of Corone, debuffing enemies around him. I mean, these are all just incredibly powerful abilities. The Beloved Son of Bretonnia. Yeah, I mean, he just has these amazing buffs, some of which will actually affect us. And Royal Hippogriff Knights, which, when fighting with King Leoncoeur, they're essentially just giant armor-piercing, terror-causing death monsters. But when you pair them, and this is kind of why I wanted to explore this synergy, with the new and improved Alberic de Bordello, whose ability, let's go ahead and get in close here. He has Spirit of the Tempest for charge bonus and speed, enemies around himself, so he's giving that to his flying allies. The Braid of Bordello, so enemies, or allies around himself, I should say, get +4 leadership, which is great, and +8 bonus versus large. So that all of a sudden kind of turns these Royal Hippogriff Knights into kind of large, anti-large flying cavalry, and it's very powerful. And then we've also taken the Wrath of Manon. It applies a leadership debuff of 16, which is pretty amazing versus a race like the Skaven, and that can sometimes single-handedly cause whole formations to rout if you get it in the right spot. And of course, it does damage as well. And then we have a Paladin up on a Pegasus, and the Paladin has been buffed to also include anti-large. So the general idea here is that I'm going to have a nice goon squad, very mobile, tactical squad, with which I can take out any kind of large targets that I see on the battlefield. So hidden in the forest here, I had 2 units of Grail Knights, kind of the best of the best as far as Bretonnia is concerned. They're another anti-large unit, physical resistance, perfect vigor. I had some polearms here, just kind of protecting them just in case. You never know what's going to be vanguarded when you fight against the Skaven. And I kept them hidden to the last moment. But when I saw kind of what the Skaven were up to, I saw it gets Zap Zap Warp Lightning Cannon with its special ability that resets cooldowns. And I was like, you know what, we've got to make the moves. We've got to move forward. My front line is a pretty unique mix of men-at-arms with shields. Very cheap, very cost-effective. But against the Skaven and against the High Elves also, I love the Battle Pilgrims. So they're a unit that you don't get to see a lot anymore. They're kind of in that weird zone where Foot Squires just do better in so many more matchups. And men-at-arms are so cheap that you can kind of find it hard to take them. But with their super high leadership at 93 currently, they have shields and frenzy, so they're immune to psychology. So, sending them into a front line, they can take all that withering fire from archers that I figured the High Elves would have. They're just a really good jack of all trades type of unit. And I like mixing them in the front here. I have the Holy Wardens of La Maison Tall. Hopefully I said that correctly. But they have flaming and magical attacks. But aside from that, they're essentially unbreakable. And if I remember right, we'll try and get a pretty epic shot here in the late game, because they are fight literally to the last man, which is just unbelievable and was super thematic. More polearms here out on my flanks, and then kind of for my range damage, and I like this versus large targets, lords having the pox arrows, that poison debuff, but it's also very good against High Elves. The High Elves archers are so much more expensive than the Bretonnian archers that just trading, even if you're trading evenly, you're usually coming out ahead. The Defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis, I like to use them as shock cavalry in the front line. They also have frenzy and immune to psychology, but they're anti-infantry, so sometimes you can just charge them in and out and get lots of damage with them. And then, of course, a Damsel with the Lore of Life, Regrowth, Earth Blood, and Awaken the Wood, I believe. And that's just to trigger Life Bloom. My ally, I don't think he took a caster. So, that Life Bloom that I'm going to be triggering is going to be applying to his front line as well. And before we get way too into it, let's just kind of pause it for a second and go over his front line. More spearmen at arms. He also took some battle programs, so good on him. He kind of gave him some chevrons too. 104 leadership at the moment, sitting next to the Grail Relic, which is applying those buffs. Let's check out exactly what their buffs are, because nowadays you don't get to see this unit very much. It's fallen out of favor. But plus 12 leadership and immunopsychology. The battle programs don't need the immunity to psychology, but the leadership essentially makes them unbreakable. And then some foot squires here batting cleanup in terms of the actual damage they can do versus what a basic men-at-arm can do. And then I also think I forgot. Yes, so this is a pretty important little group here as well. My ally kind of wisely decided to put his trebuchets on the high ground amongst my formation, which allowed me to protect them very well. I'm not sure about, kind of blocking them up like this. I don't hate this. I think sometimes it has its merits to do this instead of going wide. It just kind of makes a smaller pocket that's easier to protect. But the Beast Slayers of Bastion are another unit that I brought. Going to be excellent if I had to take down any sort of high elf cavalry. Looking at you like Dragon Princes and Fireborn, things like that. But they're also really good against monstrous Skaven units. And I've got them kind of purposefully sitting behind the lip of this hill to ensure that they wouldn't have taken any type of, counter artillery fire. They're an expensive unit, and they're one you definitely want to stick around until the end of the game. So, there's a lot to go over here, guys. I hope you don't mind the long intro. The High Elf player went with 3 dragons. 2 star dragons. Essentially, the prince is mounted on a star dragon. An incredible duelist. But he also took a moon dragon with a few chevrons. The star dragon has a few chevrons. The star dragon is the most powerful monstrous unit in the game, bar none. 580 weapon strength, 64 flaming melee attack. It's just a brutal creature, and we're going to have to try and goon out using only our Royal Hippogriff Knights, a Paladin, and Alberic. They're all getting that anti-large bonus from Alberic, and Guardian is going off for Alberic as well, who's probably going to be the focus of a lot of this. And the Hippogriff Knights, the Royal Hippogriff Knights, we need them to really pull their weight in this fight. They have really tanky models, and with a little help, little regrowth, or a little Earthblood from our Damsel, we should be able to take this fight. We're also going to get some Overwatch support from the Peasant Bowman. But meanwhile, the High Elf player is going to be doing something that I kind of like, kind of don't like. It really depends on the situation. He's going to be dividing his forces. Some of his ground game is going to go over here, and by that I mean his spearmen and his white lions. And others are going to be going over here to aid the Skaven player. The Skaven player went with a lot of ranged assets. All of these brand new Warplock Jezzails, and they're just snipers ready to fire on this ridge with the Warp Lightning Cannon. And they're going to be devastating versus really anything. I mean, they do a ton of armor-piercing damage as well. Going to be good versus things like Grail Knights. Going to be good versus Battle Pilgrims. They're in an excellent spot, and they're going to be well protected by very resolute High Elf Spearmen, and just tons of Clan Rats with shields can mix it up with men-at-arms quite effectively. This assassin was deployed kind of out and was quickly discovered. Surprised my ally isn't going for it. I would probably surround it and nuke it. But there are some Rattling Guns weapons teams hidden right on the edge of the forest. I like that. They're going to receive some cover without really having their line of sight blocked by the trees. And then behind them are Deathglow Bombardiers. These are the anti-infantry variant, but their armor piercing is good enough that they can still hurt cavalry. But I think the general idea here is that the Rattling Guns weapons teams are going to be what takes on the cavalry, damages them, applies that slowing debuff, and just does crazy armor piercing. But unfortunately, the Skaven player, isn't really protecting these assets very well. I would have units probably hidden here in the forest and here as well to make sure that you can't get wrapped up by a couple groups of Knights Errant and these very powerful Grail Knights. There's really going to be nothing that can stop them. Alright, so the Prince, probably the last thing to go. Nope, that's not true. There's some Skaven sneakiness over here that I think the Skaven player was probably a bit preoccupied microing. But the Bane Shield popping for the Prince, trying to get some missile parry, I guess, thinking that I would advance and start shooting with the Peasant Bowman. And I will in a second, so that's going to give him a little bit of protection from that. But he also has Stand Your Ground and the Blade of Bel Corhadris, so giving him melee attack and armor-piercing damage, making him an extremely dangerous duelist, as well as Deadly Onslaught, kind of the same thing. and Foe Seeker for that speed so you can't really run away. So just taking a lot of its abilities, and of course stand your ground, giving him that melee defense. So some breath attacks here. Looks like they were going for a very close range roasting of Alberic. And sometimes that works. Sometimes the missile just straight hits someone in the face and does 1,000 damage. But that was not the case this time. Alberic being a little bit evasive there, not really getting the full effect. Pox arrows, I'm turning them to try and, face down this threat. Put a few shots on these Lothern Sea Guard. These are the unshielded variant, so they're not really protected in this fight. They'd be protected versus overwhelming cavalry, but not versus the pox arrows that are going to be raining into them. Now this is risky. Shooting pox arrows kind of into my own units here. You'll see here, my own units are getting the poison debuff. So you got to be careful how you do that. Normally I try not to do that. And I think at some points in this battle, I'm going to opt not to risk hitting my own units. But I've got an Earthblood going off that's going to be topping off these units, making sure that I don't lose any models of the Royal Hippogriff Knights. Meanwhile, these Rat Ogres and this Hell Pit Abomination, which has gotten like a visual update. You can see all like the Warpstone energy flowing through it. It's amazing looking now. You can even see like the Skaven symbol carved into its flesh. Pretty awesome. And they're going to be running through the forest, but unfortunately for them, I did have these Grail Knights hidden for quite some time, and I'm waiting for them to advance on me. And Grail Knights are anti-large. So these two units together, I'm probably going to bring up these men-at-arms with polearms. On the edge of the map like this, they'll be able to decimate those units and take them out. So a good breath attack here coming in from the Prince. Going to be going after the Battle Pilgrims, but one of the kind of the hidden benefits of the Battle Pilgrims is that they're in a loose formation. So archer fire, artillery fire, dragon breath, all that type of stuff isn't as effective versus them as you might think. The Prince goes in on the Battle Pilgrims. It's going to be kind of disrupting my frontline charge. But at kind of this point, I'm microing who I want to attack with what. I've decided to single out the Moon Dragon. It's the weaker of the two. One of the models here got stuck fighting the Star Dragon and got murdered pretty early on. But I'm going to be making sure I make good use of Earthbloods and regrowths. I think here I get a regrowth on my Grail Knights, trying to stop them from losing any more models. They lost 10 models basically on the charge with those Rat Ogres. And I've managed to get some of my polearms here wrapped up with the Prince, and with King Leoncor's help and these Royal Hippogriff Knights, they're going to dumpster this Prince relatively easily. Meanwhile, I'm trying to push. My Holy Wardens here are taking on 2 units of White Lions, and they are super brave. Check this fight out. Slow-mo it and zoom in. K mode for a second. And like I said, I remember watching this battle as we were playing it and just being in awe, because these are 2 amazing, like, really thematic units. And they fight to the last man. And I watch in a moment the last guy in this group ends up getting a kill, and I like almost cheered. So here, so guys, forgive me if I don't remember the exact name of that ability, because you never see it. It's the Wrath of Manon. So Manon is like a sea god that the people of Bordello sort of worship. The High Elf player, unfortunately, was getting bunched up with his archers. So I took advantage of that to try and apply this Wrath of Manon attack. Let's see if we can get that going. And there's a lot of stuff going on the other side of the battlefield that I want to get to as well. So there it goes, the big tidal wave. And these units in the front are going to break. I'm going to take a huge volley of trebuchet fire into my back. But that's okay. Those are just peasants after all. And the Rattling Guns are just doing so much work. The Poison Wind Globadiers, these poor peasants, they're getting absolutely crushed. The cannon's still online, taking out all of this infantry. But honestly, if they're focused on the infantry, that means they're not protecting their squishier targets. Our very expensive cavalry is able to do whatever it wants. Some of it right now is fighting spearmen. Not the best choice, but the front line, honestly, for my Bretonnian ally was crushed. But Grail Knights, even just 2 groups of them, if they can get into this back line here and charge down these rats, yeah, it's going to be absolutely brutal. All of these rats together couldn't fight off these Grail Knights. But with a little help from some clan rats, they may have a chance. So he's trying to cycle charge. He's pulling out one group, charging with the other. But the other group sort of like pinned his other knights in place. So, you know, they're kind of all mixed in together. They're hung up on these spears. And as long as he continues to bring in these other units, he should be fine. Queek is in here. I think we didn't go over Queek, but he is has a lot of armor-piercing damage, and he's basically a good duelist versus anything. I would expect him to get a lot of kills this game. The Prince goes down, thanks to Alberic. And I think we're chasing off. I used my paladin to chase off one of the dragons. And I think it's about at this point that I bring him back. One of the dragons, I think it was the other star dragon, we chased it off the battlefield. And I'm going to be diving into the back of these Lothern Sea Guard. I've pushed my front line all the way through the kind of half-butted high elf front line. And we're now getting these men-at-arms, these battle pilgrims, into these Jezzails, who, you see here, they have almost full ammunition. I think there was a bit of a line of sight issue for them, and they were never really put onto good targets. And that sucks for them because they missed out on a lot of value here. Once the battle pilgrims get in and amongst this cannon crew, they're not going to be able to continue firing either. So I brought just enough units here to tie them down. My Grail Knights and this group of men-at-arms, they were able to beat down the rat ogres and just kill the abomination. Now you see this Skaven slave spears, a bit of a tongue twister, popping out of its dead corpse and attacking the Grail Knights. And they're going to be able to take that down, but I'm not going to leave, all of my resources in the back defending. Just like the Beast Slayers of Bastion, I've brought them to the front to try and help push off what's remaining of this front line. And you'll see here the remnants of the battle, the epic battle between the White Lions and the Holy Wardens, just bodies littering the ground. And once I was able to kind of clean up my flank, I was able to roll through with my infantry, shut down all the ranged elements here for the Skaven, and ultimately, it's kind of like we met in the middle. And yeah, it was a fun game. So let's take a look at the breakdown and see, where the kills happened, and talk about the effectiveness of some of these units. And so my front line, a mix of cheap with a little bit of hard hitting from the battle pilgrims, just good durable leadership. I figured they'd be able to stand toe-to-toe with spearmen and win, and of course they do. But they'd also, if they went up against Skaven infantry, they would just pretty much roll them, unless we're talking storm vermin. Always a necessity when you're fighting high elves to take some form of anti-large. You have to expect either dragons or phoenixes, or cavalry. I mean, high elf cavalry is a pretty terrifying thing to fight against. Got decent value here from my Grail Knights. They basically spent the whole game dealing with, rat ogres and a hell pit abomination, which managed to get 36 kills, mostly Grail Knights. So that tells you how strong they are if they're just a bit better supported. Even like one unit of clan rats or Skaven slave spears or something in that fight could have really turned it for them. My archers were firing on good targets, sometimes infantry. If you see 0 kills, that probably means they were shooting at large targets the whole battle. I did have one of them trying to help snipe out the prince. For a while there, the prince was kind of up in the air, hanging out, and I think I was trying to snipe him down. And yeah, just a great synergy here between the Paladin, Alberic de Bordelot, and the Royal Hippogriff Knights. They were a very dangerous squad, and yeah, I think that trio is basically able to handle just about anything. And let's check out my ally, who I'm sure did great. King Lewin's always amazing. I think he's just a more solid pick than Alberic, but at least he has a niche now. And yeah, his Royal Hippogriff Knights were not fighting dragons. They were in the muck fighting Skaven the whole time and getting lots of kills. His trebuchets were great. I love it in a 2v2 when one person takes just a bit of artillery, just enough to kind of get their value. If your opponent has no resources to dedicate to shutting down something like a trebuchet, then they're like guaranteed value on the battlefield. 78 kills, 74 kills. That was against high elves, not Skaven. So they obviously paid for themselves, and the Grail Knights did a good job of shutting down the backline troops. And his battle pilgrims and his spearmen at arms got wrecked by the Skaven's really kind of intense Deathglow Bombardier slash, where are they? The Rattling Gunners. Here we go. They're just overwhelming fire. Most of the time I see these guys and they just don't get a lot of kills. Their line of sight is very poor and their range is not high enough to compensate. I wouldn't be surprised to see a buff for them coming in sometime soon. Yeah, I would honestly expect that to be the case. And then, Warp Lightning Cannon did what Warp Lightning Cannons do. But at the end of the day, these Warplock Jezzails still had like 80% of their ammunition. And in a long battle like that, that should not be the case. I think it was just a kind of a easy, simple case of misdeployment. Had they been scooted up just a bit further, or had the armies been scooted back just a bit further to protect those assets, we could easily see these kills being in like the 60s, 70s, 80s on each one of them, and the battle would have looked completely different. And then a bit of miss micro here from the Lothern Sea Guard, I think, early on, really prevented them from, you know, getting any kind of value. There's no reason you should get 4 kills on a Lothern Sea Guard. You know, they could have been easily returning fire at my Pox archers and getting some kind of value. But yeah, and then we were able, of course, to dumpster this Moon Dragon pretty quick. But guys, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, my name is Brett, and my channel is Good Talk Gaming. Thanks to my ally, Monkey Man, who went ahead and added me on Steam, hopefully. And Doomhammer as well also added me. So 2 new friends. You can always make friends on multiplayer. Find a good group of guys or gals and play the heck out of some games. Add each other on Steam. And, you know, put groups together. There's no reason to ever play this game alone. And guys, if you're watching this right now and you'd like to send me a replay, all you have to do is add me on Steam, Good Talk Gaming, and I'll shoot you an email that you can send me a replay to, and I could end up casting your game on my channel. You know, my channel's small right now, but it's still cool to see yourself, you know, in that kind of professional light, watching someone else comment on your strategies and your tactics. And I like this game. I think it was a pretty back and forth, nice like show of different strategies and ideas, and we got to see some of the new units. So that's, I think, what we're all here for at the moment. But that's going to be it for me. Once again, signing off, guys. I will see you in the next one. Take care.